This is TWiT.
This episode of Tech Break is brought to you by ACI Learning. 1/3 of information security jobs require a cybersecurity certification. While organizations are hungry for cybersecurity talent, the cyber skills gap grows daily. The average salary for cybersecurity specialists is $116,000. ACI Learning's programs can get you certified. To maintain your competitive edge across audit, IT, and cybersecurity readiness, visit go.acilearning.com/twit.
A new bill unveiled yesterday that seeks to set a minimum age in the U.S., here in the United States, for social media use. And as you can imagine, something this big is never cut and dry. So I invited Shoshana Weissmann, head at R Street Institute, and just awesome Twitterer, to share her thoughts on this bill. Welcome to the show, Shoshana.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to get you on. We've had you on TWiT and a few other shows a couple of times, and I just always really enjoy it when you're on the network. So I was like, got to get Shoshana on the show today. So thank you. So let's start with the basics of the draft bill. The reason that I brought you on is because I was really intrigued by your words that you shared on Twitter about this. You certainly have opinions, but before we get to kind of like your thoughts on how this is shaped and everything, let's start with the basics. So it's called the Protecting Kids on Social Media Act. What is it seeking to protect kids from exactly?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, it doesn't say what it's trying to protect kids from, which is kind of, I mean, that's legislation. I think the press release had a little bit more in there. It's a general, people are concerned about kids on social media. I'm sympathetic to some of the concerns, even though I do think some of them are overblown. There's also a lot of exemptions. So it would apply to Twitter, but not ZocDoc. Like review sites are kind of exempt. Amazon, any sites that are basically for e-commerce are exempt. And the way they crafted it is it's fairly solid. There's going to be some discrepancy about what's included, but clear social media versus e-commerce sites, social media versus review sites. Those are pretty different, but I always get such a kick out of legislation that carves out video games, because that was a tech panic 20 or 30 years ago. It's, that's kind of, everyone's chill with video games now, which is always just kind of funny to see tech panic move to tech panic. And the basic of it is that they want to verify age for kids using social media. And it would also include Pornhub, because companies like Pornhub allow users to share video. It's functionally a social media site in most ways, but other legislation would not have applied to it, which is always kind of funny, because that's a part of where the concern comes from. And the basic thing is it's age verification. They want parents to verify age of teenage users. And the big difference with this, as opposed to many other of the state level bills, is that they create an age verification system through it, or they create the thing that will create it. And they have a lot of principles that go with it, but there will be a lot of incentive to use it, because companies can create their own stuff. But if they create their own method for age verification, it's subject to the reasonable standard, which is pretty YOLO. Like that can mean a lot of different things. Yeah. But if they go with the government system, then it's a safe harbor. So there's a lot of incentive for companies to just say, we'll just use your system.
Interesting. So, and this is early on, so we don't really know exactly how any of this would really be implemented, right? Like, is this laying out specific rules for this? It's interesting that you pointed out for the social media platforms that it deems to be social media, even though there are probably some that would be qualified as social media that aren't included here. Like, what are the exact rules that this would hold them to?
Yeah, the top line rule is there's actually a couple of funny ones. So I'll start with one of the early ones in there. You can't use algorithms for kids. Like kids cannot be shown content through algorithms. But as many listeners know, Time Ordered is an algorithm, and it does not exclude that. It only excludes like showing ads related to content, related to like the content, not to the user, for kids, but it doesn't exclude basic algorithms. So it bans math. I know it doesn't intend to do that, but The
that is algorithm, right? Algorithm is essentially math. It's coded math. So, like, depending on where you draw those lines, it could be anything, on a computer. Really.
Yeah. And as written, it means math. It means time ordered. It means anything except just data. So that in itself, it's a common problem I see in legislation. Schatz, in fairness, often writes more solid legislation, even if I think it's wrong and it has holes. He generally is a little bit better on that kind of stuff. So it's surprising. And then the rest of it is just age verification. And all it says is you have to verify age of users, of every user on the social media site. There's time limits on when exactly it has to start from enactment. But you will have to verify the age of different users. And either you do it in a reasonable way or you do it through the government's way. And if the government gives you that option, you're going to use the government's way.
Reasonable. Love that. If that's the terminology, it's like, okay, well, how exactly do you define that? I mean, age verification, like we've seen age verification. It's a little pop-up that says, are you 18 years old or whatever? And all you have to do is Y or N. And of course, everyone just hits Y. But what is different about the age verification that they're proposing here? Is this like a federal ID system, something that's a lot more integrated than just taking your word for it?
Yeah, and that's what all this new age verification legislation does. Other legislation might say, like the first version of Utah's bill was like you have to upload a government ID and your home address to TikTok, which is super fun because Utah banned TikTok from government devices because of data security reasons. So maybe you think twice about that. The final bill in Utah is a lot more like this, and it defers to the government on exactly how to do it, which I don't love because if you can't figure it out in the legislative process and you haven't done that research, then you're just enacting whatever will be, will be. And this kind of does the same thing because while it allows alternate methods, with the standard they have, it's going to be government ID or a biometric like face scanning. That's the whole problem. Like France wanted to do age verification more than anyone, and their own data department put out a report saying, hey, there's no way to do this while protecting privacy. We want there to be, and we encourage people to invent a way. But if you're going to get accuracy, you're going to violate privacy. And if you don't violate privacy, you won't get accuracy. So when you put in that standard, you're going to violate privacy. There are people who are sure it can happen and who think technology exists, but I haven't seen it. And no one I trust has seen that. And even something like the age verification, basically the group, the trade association of the people who want to do this stuff are saying we can scan your faces and not keep the scans. That'll be great. So the whole problem is the technology they want doesn't exist.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I'm just trying to think of what other methods could actually be implemented. Are any privacy conscious groups that you know of saying, look, we appreciate what this is trying to do, or efforts like these are trying to do, but we also see huge holes in, this idea of verification with an ID or biometrics. This is a way to do it responsibly. Do we even know of a responsible way to do this that does kind of satisfy both sides of things, makes things more secure and respects our data and our privacy? I mean, it seems like they're at opposition with each other. That's almost impossible.
And they are. France wants it more than anyone. They're going ahead with it while acknowledging the massive problems, which, I can respect, even if I think it's wrong. At least they're being honest that this doesn't exist in the form we want it in. It's, we're going to have to take it in its imperfect form. And that's a fine stance. I'll disagree with it, but it's an honest stance. But the exact problem is what you're getting to. There isn't the technology that we wish there was. Mm-hmm. And if there was, I'd be a lot more open to a lot of things here. If you could use that to verify age in a fully privacy respecting way before someone was able to access Pornhub or something like that, I wouldn't have an issue with that. With some sites I would, but not that kind of stuff and certain other things. But the problem is that just doesn't exist. If you go in person somewhere to get cigarettes or to buy, pornographic videos or whatever, you can have someone look at your ID and never keep a record of it. But you can't do that online.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what kind of penalties does one of these defined social media companies face if this bill is brought into law and they fail to adhere to it? What are the penalties? Does it specify that?
Yeah, it's many thousands of dollars, and it has its own formula for calculating it. It's something like the number of users affected versus the number of violations, something to that effect. That's pretty common for this kind of stuff. Often they'll just set it at many thousands of dollars, but this has an equation. But the penalties aren't as effective as the whole problem is you can't have these penalties for something that's an impossible task, or that's going to force these companies to violate their users' privacy, because, this is creating just massive honeypots for hackers if they're maintaining this information. And to its credit, the legislation discourages people from maintaining the age verification information. They're saying, you don't have to maintain it. You can find other ways to verify, but it's all a wink and a nod, because if they're not using the government method, they're of course going to maintain that information to prove compliance. And then the government can get warrants to look for it. Because right now we do have some real true anonymity online. People will tip their hands by tweeting their personal information or by leaving other traces of who they are. Anonymity isn't perfect. But this really gets rid of that if, you see these provisions in the law that says something like, the government cannot access the age verification information in order to link specific people to specific accounts unless there's a warrant. But government gets hacked a lot, and government likes personal information a lot. Like, they violate the Fourth Amendment all the time. Like, I don't trust that. And again, the whole problem with this law is that it's not workable while protecting people's rights. On all of this, in addition to violating the First Amendment right to anonymous speech, like, Federalist Papers,
Yeah. Okay. So then given your perspective that you just shared, do you think this has are we going to see this go into law? Likelihood of this going into law at some point? And, are there revisions that you would like to see that would kind of win you over as far as this is concerned?
So I think there are things they could do to make it better, but the core problem is the technology they want doesn't exist. And that, you can't fix that. If the technology one day does exist, I'd be willing to talk further and give more ideas and, work on this. But there are things they could make it better, such as defining algorithm as not everything, like exempting some math from algorithm, the definition. But the thing they want doesn't exist. And there is rational desire to protect kids from certain content. Sure. But I think this goes way too far. And the problem is, there is a lot of desire to protect kids from stuff online, no matter the costs. And I think this is what this is. And because of that, I think you could see it go into law. Not that I'm certain it will. I think some people might take a look at this and get worried. People like Ron Wyden in the Senate, who is the father of Section 230 and also very interested in privacy protection. But there's a lot of, let's protect the kids and honest stuff there. But it's just not a good bill, and it's not workable, but it might be enacted.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, Shoshana, always a pleasure to get you on the network, and a pleasure in this case to have the chance to talk with you when you're on the network. So thank you for hopping on today and sharing your thoughts on this bill. If people want to follow the work that you and your organization are doing, tell them a little bit about it real quick.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I love the network. You guys are such nerds, and it's nice to talk to other nerds. I'm at Senator Shoshana on Twitter for as long as it exists. And we're also at RSI on Twitter for that same amount of time. And you can see all our work at rstraight.org. Right on. Thank you, Shoshana. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk to you soon. All right. Take care.